I want a divorce, Elizabeth. Daniel's voice was cold, devoid of the warmth I had once known. 40 years of marriage, and it had come to this. I looked at him, his face illuminated by the flickering light above us. Why, Daniel? After all these years, why now? He avoided my gaze, his eyes fixed on the divorce papers he had nonchalantly placed on the table. I've met someone else, he said bluntly. Someone younger, more vibrant. The word vibrant stung me. Wasn't I vibrant enough when I was juggling jobs to pay our bills? Wasn't I vibrant when I nursed his ailing father, our child clinging to my skirt? I wanted to scream, to let out the frustration that had been building up for years. But I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and asked, "And what about me, Daniel? What about what I want?" "What you want," he scoffed. "You should have thought about that before becoming so complacent." Complacent. The word hit me like a slap. All those years of putting his needs above mine, of sacrificing my dreams for our family, and this was how he saw me. I felt a tear trickle down my cheek, but I quickly wiped it away. "Fine, Daniel," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "If that's what you want, but I won't go quietly. I deserve more than this, and I will fight for what is rightfully mine." He looked at me then, his expression a mix of surprise and disdain. "You think you can take me on? Go ahead, try, but you'll get nothing from me." I knew this wouldn't be easy. Daniel had always been stubborn, set in his ways, but so was I. And for the first time in 40 years, I was ready to fight back. As I left the kitchen, the papers still lying untouched on the table, I realized that this was not the end of my story. It was just the beginning. A beginning where I could finally be me, Elizabeth Hartman, not just Daniel's wife. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped outside. I looked up at the stars, a sense of freedom slowly seeping into my bones. Yes, this was just the beginning, and I was ready for whatever lay ahead. I sat by the window of my modest apartment, a cup of lukewarm tea in my hands, gazing into the past. The early days with Daniel seemed like a different life, a different Elizabeth. Back then I was Elizabeth Martin, full of dreams and aspirations. We met at a friend's party, a casual encounter that blossomed into something more. Daniel was charming, his laughter infectious. I was captivated, believing we could build a wonderful life together. I was 24, he was 29, and the world seemed full of possibilities. Our wedding was a simple affair, but it was ours, and that made it perfect. We moved into a small apartment, our first home, filled with love and laughter. But the laughter soon faded, replaced by the harsh realities of life. Daniel's job was never stable. He drifted from one position to another, his salary barely covering his personal expenses. It fell on me to bear the financial burden. I took up a job as an administrative assistant, working long hours to ensure our bills were paid. "You're late again, Elizabeth," Daniel would complain as I walked in, exhausted. "I'm hungry." "There's food in the fridge," I'd reply, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "I'm not your roommate, Elizabeth. I'm your husband. You should take care of me," he'd retort, his words like daggers to my heart. I remember one particularly grueling day when I came home to find the apartment in disarray. "Why haven't you cleaned up?" I asked, struggling to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Cleaning? That's a woman's job, isn't it?" Daniel replied nonchalantly, not even looking up from the TV. I felt a surge of anger, but suppressed it. This was my husband, the man I had vowed to love and cherish. But as the days turned into months and the months into years, that love was tested, strained to its limits by his constant disregard and entitlement. I often lay awake at night, wondering if this was all life had to offer. Was I destined to spend my days catering to a man who saw me not as a partner but as a convenience? As I sipped my tea, the bitter taste mingling with my bitter memories, I realized that those early years were not just about financial struggles. They were about losing myself, piece by piece, to a marriage that was slowly suffocating me. But now, as I sat alone, I felt a flicker of hope. I had a chance to reclaim those lost pieces, to find the Elizabeth who had dreams and aspirations. It was time to rediscover myself, away from the shadow of Daniel Hartman. The years rolled on, each one like a wave eroding the shore of my self-worth. I remember the day we moved into Daniel's father's house. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, a way to save money, but it became a permanent fixture of our lives, a testament to the sacrifices I made for the family. Daniel's father, Robert, was a stern man, He had never approved of me, seeing me as an inadequate match for his son. Living under his roof only intensified his disdain. "A woman's place is in the home," he'd often say, casting a critical eye over my work attire. I tried to juggle my job and my responsibilities at home, but it was never enough. Daniel's expectations grew, his criticisms sharper. Why is dinner always late? Why is the house never clean? The questions were like lashes, each one leaving a mark. When our daughter Emily was born, the joy of motherhood was overshadowed by the mounting pressures. I remember holding her in my arms, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and wondering how I would manage. Daniel's contribution to parenting was minimal, leaving me to balance work, home, and a newborn. The years with Robert were challenging. His health began to decline, and the responsibility of his care fell to me. Daniel's excuses were always the same. "I'm too busy with work," or "I don't know how to take care of him." I remember one evening after a particularly grueling day, I sat beside Robert's bed, feeding him his dinner. His hands trembled as he tried to grasp the spoon, his pride warring with his frailty. "Thank you, Elizabeth," he murmured, a rare moment of kindness in our strained relationship. It was in these small moments that I found the strength to continue. But the burden was heavy, a weight that pressed down on me, squeezing the joy out of my life. As Emily grew, she became my beacon of hope, her laughter a balm to my weary soul. I watched her play, her innocence a stark contrast to the complexities of my life. I wanted more for her, more than the life I'd accepted. The realization hit me one day as I sat in the office, my mind wandering from the spreadsheet on my screen. I was more than just Daniel's wife, more than Robert's caretaker. I was Elizabeth Hartman, and I deserved to be seen, to be heard. But it would take years and a crumbling marriage for me to finally act on that realization. Years of sacrifice, of putting others before myself. It was time to change that narrative, to take control of my own story. As the years passed, the walls of our home felt like they were closing in on me, each day a repeat of the last, filled with unending responsibilities and a deepening sense of loneliness. Daniel's indifference to our family's needs grew, his presence at home becoming more like that of a distant lodger than a husband or father. It was a crisp autumn evening when I felt the first real stirrings of rebellion. I had just finished clearing the dinner table, the remnants of a meal eaten mostly in silence. Daniel had spent the evening as he usually did, buried in the newspaper or glued to the television, oblivious to the world around him. "Daniel, we need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, his expression one of mild annoyance. "What now, Elizabeth? I'm tired." "It's about us, about our marriage," I said, finding strength in my resolve. "Our marriage is fine," he replied dismissively, turning his attention back to the TV. "No, it's not fine. It hasn't been fine for a long time," I countered, feeling a surge of frustration. He sighed, setting down the remote. "What do you want from me, Elizabeth? I want you to see me, to hear me. I'm not just a caretaker or a maid. I'm your wife, and I'm unhappy." There was a long silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice devoid of empathy. "If you're unhappy, maybe you should do something about it. Change your job, find a hobby. Don't put it on me." I felt a sharp sting of pain, realizing that the man I had married, the man I had loved, was no longer there. In his place was a stranger, someone who saw me not as a partner but as a convenience. The days that followed were a blur of introspection and growing resentment. The more I thought about my life, the more I realized how much of myself I had given up for a marriage that was now nothing more than a facade. It was during one of those long, sleepless nights that I made a decision. I couldn't continue living like this, in a marriage devoid of love and respect. I needed to find myself again, to rediscover the Elizabeth who had dreams and aspirations before they were buried under the weight of others' expectations. The morning I told Daniel I was considering a divorce, he laughed. "You'll never leave me, Elizabeth. You need me too much." But he was wrong. I didn't need him. I hadn't needed him for a long time. What I needed was to find myself again, to break free from the chains of a loveless marriage, and so I began to plan my escape, my journey back to myself. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to be Elizabeth Hartman, not just Daniel's wife. The morning I decided to divorce Daniel was clear and bright, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a woman who had aged beyond her years, worn down by the relentless demands of a thankless marriage. But in my eyes, there was also a flicker of something new, determination. I sat at the kitchen table, the divorce papers in front of me. Daniel had left early, avoiding the confrontation. I signed my name with a steady hand, each stroke a line drawn in the sand, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The divorce process was grueling. Daniel fought me at every turn, unwilling to concede anything, but I stood my ground, fueled by years of suppressed anger and disappointment. In the end, the court granted me a fair settlement, not out of generosity, but out of legal obligation. I remember walking out of the courthouse, the weight of the past 40 years slowly lifting off my shoulders. I was free, but freedom came with its own set of challenges. I had to rebuild my life from scratch, find a place to live, and secure my financial future. I found a small apartment close to my workplace. It was modest, but it was mine. I decorated it with things I loved, each item a reflection of the new life I was building. I started to rediscover the simple joys I had long forgotten, reading a book uninterrupted, taking long walks, and meeting friends for coffee. But the biggest change was in how I saw myself. I was no longer just Daniel's wife, defined by my relationship to a man who had taken me for granted. I was Elizabeth Hartman, an independent woman with her own dreams and desires. As the months passed, I began to feel a sense of peace. The bitterness and anger that had consumed me slowly faded, replaced by a quiet strength. I had survived the worst and come out stronger. I occasionally heard snippets of Daniel's life after our divorce. He struggled to adjust to his new reality, the reality of a man who had lost the woman who had taken care of everything for him. But that was no longer my concern. My focus was on building a life that was fulfilling and joyful, a life that was truly mine. The journey was not easy. There were days when loneliness crept in, when the memories of the past threatened to overwhelm me. But I had learned to be resilient, to find happiness in the smallest things, and to cherish my independence. The divorce marked the end of my marriage to Daniel, but it was also the beginning of my journey to self-discovery. It was a journey of healing, of finding joy in solitude, and of learning to love myself. The first year after the divorce was a time of profound transformation for me. I had stepped out of the shadow of a stifling marriage and was learning to navigate the world on my own terms. Every day brought its challenges, but also its small victories and joys. My new apartment became a sanctuary, a place where I could be myself without judgment or expectation. I filled it with plants, their vibrant greens a stark contrast to the neutral tones of the home I had shared with Daniel. I took pleasure in caring for them, marveling at their growth and resilience, qualities I was beginning to see in myself. I also rediscovered old passions. I had always loved painting, a hobby I had set aside in the busy years of marriage and motherhood. Now I set up a small studio in a corner of my living room, and I spent my evenings lost in the world of colors and forms. It was therapeutic, a way to express the emotions that I had kept bottled up for so long. One of the most significant changes was in my social life. During my marriage, my world had revolved around Daniel and his needs. Now I reached out to old friends, rekindling relationships that had faded over the years. I also made new friends, people who knew me not as Daniel's wife but as Elizabeth Hartman, with my own stories and experiences. I joined a book club, finding delight in discussions that ranged far beyond the pages of the novels we read. I took a cooking class, laughing and learning with a group of strangers who quickly became friends. Each new experience was a step towards rebuilding my identity, piece by piece. Financial independence was another area where I thrived. I had received a fair settlement in the divorce, but I knew I couldn't rely on it forever. I took charge of my finances, learning about investment and savings. I was determined to secure my future, to never again be dependent on someone else for my financial well-being. But perhaps the most profound change was in my relationship with myself. For years, I had defined myself through my roles as a wife and mother. Now I began to see myself as an individual, with my own needs and desires. I learned to enjoy my own company, to cherish the solitude that had once frightened me. I remember one evening, sitting on my balcony, a cup of tea in my hand, watching the sunset. The sky was ablaze with oranges and pinks, a breathtaking canvas of nature's beauty. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of contentment, a peace I hadn't known in years. I had come a long way from the scared, uncertain woman who had signed those divorce papers. I had faced my fears, embraced change, and emerged stronger. I was no longer just surviving. I was thriving. In the second year after our divorce, news about Daniel began to trickle back to me through mutual acquaintances and unexpected encounters. It seemed that life, after having taken away so much from me, was now showing me a different side, one where karma played its hand. Daniel, who had once carried himself with an air of invincibility, was now a shadow of his former self. His relationship with the younger woman he had left me for had ended disastrously. She, unlike me, had little patience for his dismissive attitude and entitlement. I heard she left him for someone else, leaving Daniel alone and embittered. Financially, Daniel's situation had deteriorated rapidly. The savings he had once boasted about were dwindling. His habits of extravagant spending, which he indulged in during the early days of his newfound freedom, had caught up with him. Without me to manage the finances, he had fallen into debt. I remember feeling a mix of emotions when I first heard about his struggles. There was a part of me that felt vindicated, seeing him face the consequences of his actions, but there was also a sense of sadness, a mourning for the man I had once loved, who had lost his way so completely. Daniel's professional life, too, had taken a hit. His performance at work had suffered during the turmoil of his personal life. Rumors of his unprofessional behavior had spread, and soon he found himself without a job. The pride he had once taken in his career was now replaced by a sense of defeat and hopelessness. The house, which had been a bone of contention during our divorce, was now a burden to him. Without my upkeep, it had fallen into disrepair. The garden, which I had tended to with such care, was now overgrown and wild. The walls needed painting, the roof needed repairs, but Daniel lacked both the resources and the will to tend to them. Occasionally, I would drive past our old house, a pang of nostalgia hitting me as I saw the unkempt lawn and the peeling paint. It was a physical manifestation of Daniel's decline, a stark reminder of how far he had fallen. Despite everything, I found no joy in his misfortune. The years I had spent with him, the love I had once felt, made it impossible for me to completely harden my heart against him. But I also knew that this was his path to walk, his lessons to learn. I had my own journey to focus on, a journey of healing and self-discovery. Daniel's undoing was a stark reminder of how life can change, how the choices we make shape our destiny. It reinforced my resolve to live a life true to myself, a life where I was no longer a bystander, but the author of my own story. The third year after my divorce marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with unexpected joys and the blossoming of new love. It was a time when the wounds of the past began to heal, and I allowed myself to embrace the possibilities of the future. I met John at a community art exhibition. He was a widower, a gentle man with a kind smile and an eye for beauty. Our love for art brought us together, and our conversations flowed effortlessly. He had a way of listening that made me feel heard, truly heard, for the first time in years. John, like me, had experienced loss and heartache. His wife had passed away after a long illness, leaving him to navigate the complexities of life alone. We found solace in each other's company, sharing stories of our pasts and dreams for our futures. Our relationship grew gradually, a slow and steady flame that warmed both our hearts. We spent our days exploring art galleries, attending concerts, and enjoying quiet dinners. With John, I rediscovered the joys of companionship, the simple pleasure of sharing life with someone who understood and appreciated me. The decision to remarry was not one I took lightly. The scars of my marriage with Daniel were still there, a reminder of the pain that love could bring. But with John, it felt different. There was a mutual respect and understanding, a shared desire to support and uplift each other. Our wedding was a small affair, just close friends and family. It was a celebration of new beginnings, a testament to the resilience of the human heart. As I stood beside John, exchanging vows, I felt a sense of wholeness, a feeling that I had come home. Life with John was peaceful and fulfilling. We moved into a new house, one that we chose together, filling it with memories and laughter. He encouraged my passion for painting, and I supported his love for gardening. Together we created a space that was a true reflection of our love. My daughter, Emily, saw the change in me. She was initially hesitant about John, protective of the mother who had been through so much. But as she saw the happiness he brought into my life, her reservations faded. She embraced John as a part of our family, and I watched their bond grow with a heart full of gratitude. John and I traveled, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the opportunity. We explored new places, immersing ourselves in different cultures and experiences. Each journey was an adventure, a chance to see the world through each other's eyes. As I lay in bed each night, John's steady breathing beside me, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. I had gone through the depths of despair, faced my fears, and emerged stronger. I had learned to love again, to open my heart to the possibilities of a new beginning. My life with John was a testament to the fact that it's never too late to find happiness, to start anew. It was a reminder that even after the darkest nights, the sun will rise, bringing with it the light of hope and the promise of a new day. As I sat on the porch of our home, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I reflected on the journey that had led me to this moment. Beside me, John held my hand gently, a silent symbol of the companionship and love that had become my new reality. The years following my marriage to John were like a balm to my soul. We had both found in each other a second chance at love, a chance to rewrite our stories with a happier ending. My life, once defined by the shadows of a loveless marriage, was now illuminated by the light of mutual respect and understanding. My relationship with my daughter Emily had blossomed as well. She had grown into a strong, independent woman, much like I had become. Our conversations, once cautious and superficial, were now deep and meaningful. She shared her life with me, her successes and her struggles, and I offered her the wisdom of my experiences, the lessons I had learned from my own journey. The joy of being a grandmother added another layer of happiness to my life. Emily's children, my grandchildren, were a source of endless delight. I saw in them the hope and promise of the future, a continuation of our family's legacy. John, with his kind nature, became a beloved figure in their lives, a testament to the fact that family is not just defined by blood, but by love and choice. Professionally, I had found fulfillment as well. I continued to work, but now on my terms. I pursued projects that interested me, that sparked my creativity and passion. My art, once a hobby pushed to the sidelines, was now a significant part of my life. I held exhibitions, sharing my work with a wider audience, receiving recognition for my talent and vision. In my moments of solitude, I often thought of Daniel. I heard through the grapevine that he lived a solitary life, his pride and choices leading him down a path of isolation. There was no joy in knowing this, only a sense of sadness for what might have been. I hoped that he, too, would find some peace, some lesson in the life he had chosen. As I looked ahead, I saw a future filled with possibilities. John and I had plans to travel, to explore, to experience all that life had to offer. We wanted to make the most of the time we had, to create memories that would last a lifetime. I had learned that life is a series of chapters, each with its own challenges and joys. The key was to embrace each chapter, to learn and grow from the experiences it offered. My past had shaped me, but it did not define me. I was the author of my story, and I had the power to write the ending I desired. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the world, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the journey, for the lessons learned, and for the love found. My story was one of resilience, of finding strength in adversity, and of the redemptive power of love. And as the stars began to twinkle in the evening sky, I knew that my story was far from over. It was just beginning.